There's a few things you need to do before you load into any game of Eternal Return, and these things are so big they can flat out dictate the way the game is going to go for you. What's poppin' everyone, it's your boy Levi, and we're going to look at how you can make sure you always get your loot during the early game of Eternal Return. You may or may not know this already, but the game doesn't start when you load into the game. It actually starts in character select. Choosing which build you're going to run is an important part of dictating how your early game is going to go. Some characters can get away with running the same build every game, but sometimes you're going to run into lobbies where your route has 4 or 5 players in each zone. When this happens, you might want to consider picking an alternate route, especially if zones get crowded later into your build. You're less likely to find items in these zones because not only do you have to deal with it being contested at the start, but also contested when people go in and out as their second and third zones. Have an alternate build saved in case you have to run it. This can be the same build, but routed differently, or just a completely different build that's still viable. And speaking about contested starting zones, you don't always have to start in your first zone. Most weapons in the game take at least 2 zones to build, and on occasion 3. This means that any of the zones that contain your weapon components can theoretically be a starting zone. If your first zone is empty, but your second zone is contested, consider starting in your second zone. You want to start in the more contested zone because when everyone spawns at the start of game, unless you're in an overcrowded area, everyone will have their own loot distribution. For more information on loot distribution and loot distribution manipulation, be sure to check out my community tab for a deeper dive tomorrow. The next thing you'll want to do before the timer finishes counting down is you'll want to look ahead at your next zone. This will give you an idea of where other players are going to spawn. This is important because it will ensure that when you hyperloop, you don't waste time checking a distribution that's already been looted. You'll want to pay attention to see if they stay in their spawn distribution or run to a different one. Now you're probably wondering why you would want to run to a different distribution than the one that you spawned in. This is because not all distributions are weighted equally. If you have the option, use the movement speed at the start of the game to run to a different loot distribution that's closer to the hyperloop or closer to the next zone that you're running to. You'll save time in your routing by doing so. You only want to do this if that distribution that you're running to is empty. If there's already another player in that distribution, cut your losses. You don't want to leave your unlooted distribution just to loot behind someone, unless you need very little items. If it's taken, simply move to the next closest instead. Follow these tips and you can assure that you'll get your items more and more often, but you'll still need to learn how to move through each zone. Keep a lookout for my next video where I'll teach you how to go through the early game of Eternal Return. If some of the concepts in this video didn't make sense, be sure to check out the video in the end card where we go through the tutorial together in Eternal Return.